A horrifying entity that tortures its victims in a never-ending cycle. A being that simply exists to give you nightmares and to make Tails and Knuckles suffer. This might sound familiar if you've played any Sonic.exe game, and you'd be right. In the era of gruesome Sonic games, Sonic.ribs is just that. A spooky hedgehog that just likes to take Knuckles and Tails to hell. But he does have an interesting aspect to him, of which I'll get into a bit later. In this video, I'll be talking about the small amount of lore that he has, fun facts, and talking about the game this guy comes from. I don't imagine this video will be too long, but I have had quite a few requests to cover this guy, and I am a man of the people. So, without further ado, let's learn who this sadistic entity is. Sonic.ribs is a character made by Rabbit X, and he comes from the game of his same name. Ribs originated as a being embodying a 3-in-1 Sonic game collection, which contained the first 3 classic Sonic games, Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles. With his abilities, he took control of the data of all 3 games and merged them into a single experience, in turn adding a conscious to each of the coded characters. Ever since then, he's been torturing the cast for his entertainment in what he deems to be a game. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what it means by conscious. Most of the time, someone's soul is put into the game and the characters act as vessels. But I think this is entirely in-universe, so it's just Tails and Knuckles who are being tortured and they're aware of what's happening. However, there's one detail that I find interesting about this guy. Listed in his abilities, he has something called surveillance. Ribs is not only able to watch the victims try to survive via any greenery or entities within the level's walls, but he also has a hidden camera within the game's icon to watch the players guiding them. When we talk about the game, we get to see just how aware these victims are, as they could talk to you directly. As another interesting tidbit, Sonic.ribs himself doesn't like water and will avoid it at all costs. In fact, it's said he creates clones specifically to go underwater to get his victims. So my question is, if Sonic is a vessel, what's going on with him? Is he just gone? The game only got up to Tails and Knuckles demo, and I believe it was taken down at some point. So, I guess we'll never know. Outside of everything I said, there really isn't too much to the character to my knowledge, but there is a version of the character that's getting new stuff. The new version of the character will be covered in a different video once everything is said and done, and everything discussed in this version is what I would call the legacy version of Sonic.ribs. I hear it'll have a different approach to things and try to stand on its own and be a bit more unique. So I am excited to get the update on that. So let's talk about the archived version of Sonic.ribs. Okay, I'm going to say this right off the bat. The game itself reminds me a lot of Sonic.omt and his series of games. The game asks you if you want to continue to play the ROM, and you know, that's a good sign. We start as Tails in Green Hill Zone, and to this game's credit, there are enemies and spikes here that can hurt you, making it seem like a normal Sonic game. Oh, and there are a few Easter eggs you can find scattered throughout the playthrough. The first one is in Green Hill, where if you crouch and wait for the camera to pan down at the bridge, you can find who I believe is Sync Sonic from the Friday Night Funkin' mod. If that is the character, this is an awesome Easter egg, and there are plenty more. I also think it's the only one that I was able to recognize and know, so sorry. This is definitely one of those games where you explore and try to find secrets, along with trying to find different ways to die. This game in particular pays a lot of attention to detail and looks amazing. I feel like what makes Sonic.ribs so interesting isn't necessarily his lore right now, but how he's presented and the world you're thrown into. Continuing as Tails, we find a sign that says goodbye Green Hill, and shortly after, we find a destroyed Rotobug. You can already see where this is going. We reach the end, find Sonic standing there, he pukes blood for some reason, and then smiles. Then, in OMT-like fashion, he greets us directly. The game has officially started, and the fun Green Hill Zone is gone. There are faces everywhere, destroyed power-up boxes, destroyed badniks, and you can even find Mr. Ribs aura farming behind a tree. The next level we're taken to is something we're all familiar with, a burning hellscape of Angel Island. Given this ROM is a merging of 3 different Sonic games, the game dev had a series of levels to work with. Also, you'll notice that Tails is injured now upon entering the level, and while Sonic.ribs can revive his vessels, they usually come back with something missing. After running for a while, you get hit in the face, and shortly after, we get a notification saying Miles opened a text file to talk to us. You don't know how many times I've repeated this moment. I'm sick of being handled, but I don't have any mobility, and you know it's coming, and yet you still keep playing. And basically implying that it's your fault. And even when we know this is bad, even when we know he can't escape, we'll keep playing because we're curious. The game asked us if we want to keep playing, despite knowing it was probably going to end bad for the victims. Listen, Tails, I got rent to pay and taxes. I have to get this video out, so save your pleas for someone who cares. We're thrown into a chase sequence where, surprise, surprise, we're not really fast enough to get away. Also, I'd like to note that these laughing Tails in the background really adds to the atmosphere and makes me wonder if these are a revived version of Tails who have gone insane and all they can do is laugh. Probably not, but it's a scary detail. After being caught, we get to see a tall version of Ribs, but only for a second because it minimizes your game and taunts you. A bunch of pop-ups saying you're too slow or just straight up laughing at you, until you're met with an unnerving screen of Tails completely disfigured. Usually it's okay to show these things on YouTube, but even I'm skeptical because, wow, this really is reaching OMT levels of horrid, and that's just the first death. The next one happens when you explore a bit and stop in front of a spike. Tails stops abruptly, and you could tell by the look on his face, he knows exactly what's going to happen. The entity spawns behind him, and that's that. Some other deaths are pretty well hidden. Remember where a friend is aura farming? Well, there's actually a hidden path you could go down, and if you do, you get a new area. The ambiance here is pretty unnerving, but you don't get too far before Tails' head becomes a lid off of a jar. I have to give props to this game, the animations are incredibly smooth. It's weird for me to say that considering Tails is put through hell, but it's true. Another zone we get to go to is called Below the Surface. There are quite a few cool things to find here. First off, there's this part where you get transformed into another character and get to see another scary Sonic. Nothing happens here to my knowledge, but it's really cool that this specific area changes your character model, and while I don't know who it is, the idea of having a specific area of this is really neat. And if there are going to be games like this, I'd like to see this more. There's also this one area where a bunch of disfigured Sonics are lined up, and you're thinking at any moment one could grab you. Instead, there's a version of Sonic whose face opens up and you get jump scared. Again, the atmosphere here is something I could see people getting scared of. But you don't die here. That happens later when Tails is dragged to the bottom of the water, completely tied down. Guess you could say he's below the depths. What is wrong with me? Wait a minute, below the depths. I think that's an iceberg thing. Oh, did you guys know I did an iceberg video? You should totally... Let's go back to the Burning Hill Zone. We find this weird guy just standing here. If you guys know whose OCs these are, let me know. But that's not why we ran back. If you go to the left, like in a lot of Sonic.exe games, you get an additional level. More like an extension of the previous one. Running to the left, you find more spooky Sonics who are watching you, and what I'm presuming is someone's OC. I like to think this is the creator's friend or something, and they put them into the game. Please don't inform me on any trauma, if there is any, because I want this to be wholesome. I'd love if somebody put my character into the game, especially if they were my friend. Anyways, we didn't come here for wholesomeness. We came here to make Tails rue the day he dared to exist. Oh, and speaking of him, if you stop for a moment, he actually has different expressions that make him unique in this game. After passing some terrifying imagery and making it to the end, Sonic.ribs decides to impale Tails and turn him completely gray, saying, "For the old times." And now we're in Emerald Hills. But, you know, Tails is still looking miserable. Like, extremely miserable. Tails, what did I say? Taxes are scarier. Now get to stepping. The graphics here changed to match that of Emerald Hill, and despite the messed up Tails, this is going pretty well. until you finish the level. All of the colors drained out of the world, and scattered around are the previous bodies of Tails who have already experienced this. Or, more accurately, the same one who died multiple times. We find, this thing who seems to be friendly. More terrifying imagery, and waiting for us is a hunched over Ribs. The game glitches out for a second. One word is said from Miles. Help. Then, another message saying Miles has been deleted. Sonic.ribs saying we can see this place one last time, just like the old days. So perhaps it's alluding to the fact that we've played this game before, and this is an updated game, so I guess that would make sense. After seeing everything Tails has to offer, his file gets corrupted and we're asked to switch to a different player, this being Knuckles. We start off in Scrap Brain Zone, and like last time, everything is normal. There are enemies, rings, this guy. I actually like finding these Easter eggs, but unfortunately, I can't always tell who they are. Sorry, people these belong to. The true spooky factor doesn't start until the end of the level, where we find two versions of Sonic.ribs. We did see other clones before, but this has got to be terrible for Knuckles. The smaller one charges at you, and we get a change of scenery. This area is pretty barren, but there are still bodies and stuff scattered about. Sonic.ribs surprises us because he loves surprises. We played the worst game of tag I've ever seen, and our spooky hedgehog quickly humbles Knuckles. The next area you can find has him holding a bunch of deceased versions of Knuckles, all being held by Sonic.ribs. This isn't even the most disturbing thing. Moving forward, we get chased by a swarm of smaller clones of Sonic.ribs, where, when caught, all of them together devour Knuckles. That's only if you're caught. You are able to get away, and we're promptly taken to Scrap Zone 1. There are a few ways to make Knuckles suffer here. One is being trapped and crushed, and another is being impaled by Sonic.ribs, giving Knuckles a crystal and saying, "I don't think you like crystals." I mean, come on, Ribs, you shouldn't assume that. And after that, well, we get a thanks for playing screen. The text that pops up, all the Easter eggs and other creatures you can find, the brutal death animations all remind me of OMT, but in a way that's I still think is a little unique. The atmosphere in this game was pretty good and had some unnerving stuff, but I feel like the Knuckles section was a little lacking. I will say, the attention to detail in this game, graphics, and overall vibe is well executed. So, well done. But I do want to give some criticism, but I feel like it's actually not this game's fault, but rather the genre itself. I feel like these types of games are great for beginner game developers because it has a simple concept. You can pretty much add whatever you want. You don't have to have a cohesive story, a complicated narrative. You really don't, because if there are some pretty visuals, and some people just like watching this stuff, obviously it does interest me. But the problem is that it kind of becomes a bit monotonous. See, when you're not someone who's playing for all of the endings and you just want to load up the game, you have to die, load up the game, go back in, and you only really get to see two of the endings that you put in. If there was some sort of maybe save state that'd be like, oh, maybe you missed this, and then you go back and it alludes to what you may have missed, because it's not a linear experience and you have to start all over again, I feel like it could be a little annoying, as opposed to you could just load up a video and watch them get all of the secrets, and I feel like that's where the appeal was. But playing it yourself can be a little draining. I think if you're going to do an idea like this, I would suggest mixing it up just a little bit. I think people were mad at this game because it copied Sonic.omt. I don't think that it copied Sonic.omt, though I do think it took major inspiration and took some aspects of it, but there are some really unique things in it. I would like to see that character switch thing be maybe a secret level. All in all, I do love the way that the game looks. Sonic.ribs is horrifying, and I hope to see more from the character when he's completely remade or updated. That's all I got on Sonic.ribs. What do you guys think? Let me know down below. Subscribe, use Dunkachi on your cheeky order to get the best soap you can find and get 10% off to support the channel. Or become a member to get access to videos early. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, stay spooky.